As the morning sun softly climbed the rolling hills of Arkansas, the Duggar family home was engulfed in a multitude of golden hues. The house stood silently, a delicate silence, such as that which precedes a permanent shift in life. You could hear birds chirping outside and the soft hum of the coffee maker in the kitchen. The customary rhythm of the Duggar household started to change as the sun rose. Jim Bob Duggar, the first person up each morning, was standing by the window with a half-empty cup of coffee. He pondered profoundly as he gazed into space. On his face were the features of a man who has seen both sorrow and victory. But this morning he had an unusually light heart. He was spending some quiet time with his daughter, Josie, as he drove her to school in the morning. Josie, the youngest child in the Duggar household, was getting ready upstairs. Everyone in the room was invigorated by her presence. The tiny white flowers that adorned the hem of her favorite sky blue dress fluttered as she went. Michelle's little pink bag bobbed when she jumped around, and her hair was styled in two plaits. As Michelle heard her daughter's happy laughter echoing through the house, she couldn't help but smile a little. This kind of dawn could make you forget how fragile life is. It was simply too perfect. Jim Bob unlocked the car door, and Josie entered, humming a tune she had written the night before. They quickly got on their way after fastening their seatbelts and turning on the ignition. The chilly, fresh air outside had a faint scent of pine and dew. The radio was playing a familiar country song. Jim Bob would occasionally glance at Josie in the rearview mirror while tapping the wheel rhythmically. Her mirrors, small and naive, smiled back. She was talking about how she wanted to impress her teacher and how she presented herself at school. Her voice was as bright and beautiful as sunlight coming through a window in the car. The road ahead appeared to go indefinitely, a ribbon of flawless asphalt cutting across serene farmland. As though they were a place of prayer, the fields were enveloped in morning mist, which created a serene ambience. Jim Bob had a brief moment of appreciation. He couldn't help but consider the challenges his family had surmounted and the ongoing scrutiny they had faced as he thought back on their journey. But on this road, it didn't matter where I was heading. He and his daughter were alone in their existence. However, disaster can strike without notice. 10 crossroads near the edge of town. Unexpectedly, a large rig rushed over the brink. Because he was temporarily distracted, the driver missed the red light. Squealing tires tore into the air. The faces of Jim Bob and Squo shifted. He gripped the wheel tightly and tried to swerve, but there was not much time. The claps sounded like thunder. From the metal came a shout. The glass shattered. The car lost control and crashed into a tiny ditch. Reaching a total halt, smoke slowly started to rise from the wreckage. On the radio, there was dead air. Everything had stopped. Jim Bob was stuck in the smashed car, and his breath was faint and erratic. His forehead was bloodied. His hands trembled as he tried to move. He was in excruciating pain in his arm, yet he was unable to look away from Josie. Her blue dress was torn, her hair twisted in shards of glass, and her lifeless body lay beside him. The little pink backpack had fallen to the ground, and one strap was unfastened. Jim Bob struggled to say her name, but it remained unsaid. He lost the ability to speak. He reached for her hand, which was still warm but still not moving, and his vision blurred with tears. The distant sirens began to grow louder, fainter at first, then closer. The sky that had been clear just moments before was now shadowed by clouds that had rolled in. Jim Bob dropped to his knees. There was no need to tell him. He suspected his little girl was gone, and his entire world collapsed in that moment. The sharp sound of sirens from emergency cars tore through the quiet of the morning. The paramedics' footsteps were heavy with desperation as they rushed toward the rubble, their voices piercing. Once a peaceful stretch of highway, it was now a tangle of broken glass and bent metal. Jim Bob, aware but fading, was surrounded by a whirlpool of activity. He could hear the faint murmuring, words that tore through his soul before his mind could process them. Small one, unresponsive. His spirit felt empty, yet his body hurt. As they lifted him onto a stretcher, his hand flimsily reached out, searching for Josie. Already covered in a white sheet, she lay little and still, her world momentarily quiet. The ambulance roared approached the hospital, its lights blazing against the dappled morning sky. Jim Bob's pupils flickered open and closed on the inside. He whispered something that no one could hear. It could be a prayer, or just her name. Time passed. The hospital was filled with anguish and antiseptic. The doctors in the emergency room moved quickly, their faces grim. Jim Bob was being treated for a terrible laceration on his forehead and a broken rib, but he was totally focused on something else. When Michelle Duggar arrived, her face was as pale as paper. She realized at the moment she saw the doctors. A mother cannot be sufficiently prepared for the news she gets. The sound of her sobbing echoing along the hallway was one that breaks through emotional and physical barriers. Family members began to gather gradually. Johannah, Jessa, Johannah, and all the others. There was no longer any life or color in the once bright and exciting hospital corridors. There was silence. No one was prepared to take the chance. The only sounds to break the total silence were soft sobs and hushed prayers. In a remote room, Josie's lifeless body was placed on a simple bed. Her face was expressionless, as if she were only dreaming. There was a thin white blanket beneath her. One of her sisters placed a small teddy bear next to her pillow with unsteady hands. Jim Bob clasped his little fingers in his as he sat down beside her. He acted coolly. Not at first. He just stared, in a condition of confusion and despair. Memories flooded his mind. To get his attention, she would tug on his sleeve. Her first words would be laugh. He remembered his promise to protect her at all costs. He couldn't even save her from fate anymore. Michelle was standing behind him, her hand on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, Jim Bob, the dependable, uncompromising father figure, lost his temper. He screamed softly at first, then uncontrollably. The camera would focus on his trembling shoulders as the room filled with a serene storm of anguish. Outside, the press had already gathered. There were several of news vans parked in the lot. Reporters screamed. They took a video. Soon everyone was going to know. The Duggar family's youngest daughter had tragically died. Time, however, seemed to stop in that hospital center. For Jim, Bob, and Michelle, faith, fame, and everything else disappeared. Nothing took place. Having to say goodbye is the only stress. Rain began to fall on the morning of the funeral. A constant, gentle drizzle that seemed to weep next to them. Neither loud nor heavy. The Duggar household, which had formerly been a bustling hub of activity, fell silent. The mood was depressing. The curtains were drawn, and the lights were dimmed. What had been a children's playground in the front yard was now parked with cars. Neighborhood residents, friends, and family members quietly gathered, umbrellas in hand, heads down. Everyone was starting from scratch. What words could adequately describe such an experience? In the small white chapel on the outskirts of town, a small coffin rested beside the altar. Pale wood is covered with exquisite pink flowers and white blooms. The name was Josie Brooklyn Duggar, written in golden letters. The place had an odd atmosphere in spite of its inhabitants. Everything in the room appeared to be holding its breath, including the light, the pews, and the walls. Michelle sat in the very front row and clutched a small piece of Josie's hair ribbon. Her eyes were heated from holding back screams that never came, and she clenched her teeth. Jim Bob lay still next to her. His eyes were hollow and his face was pale as he gazed blankly into the unfathomable reality. Members of the family moved to the forefront. Johannah put up a portrait of the family that Josie had made of them, all grinning in the sun. Jessa picked up Josie's cherished doll as it was put down. Johannah prayed, her tears soaking into the hardwood floor, her breath scarcely audible. A hymn of home and heaven was sung in the distance by an eerie piano music. The soft tune of Michelle's sobbing rose above the music, a sound that echoes inside and never goes away. The camera would slowly move across the crowd, exposing familiar faces, each one broken in a different way. Some stared emotionlessly, unable to handle the weight of their loss, while others sobbed aloud. The reporters outside remained in silence for an unusually long time as the rain muffled the normally loud sound of the cameras. As the ceremony came to an end, Jim Bob got up from his chair and walked shakily up to the casket. He placed his trembling fingers on the cover and stood there for a moment, and the memories began. Josie is howling in the garden. Josie dashed into his arms. Josie blew out her birthday candles, her cheeks flushed with happiness. The pain gets more intense with every memory. The sound stops when that occurs. The pulse is the only sign of life, slow, heavy, and excruciating. The rain turned into a torrential downpour as the casket was lowered into position. Umbrellas started to shake as the water pressure rose. Michelle's sobbing had been swallowed by the storm, and she had collapsed into Jim Bob's embrace. The family is huddled together in the rain as the camera slowly pans back, creating a scene of love and sorrow. Furthermore, the ominous clouds seemed to stretch on indefinitely, as though the sky were defying separation. The Duggar house was quiet as ever that evening. Josie's room was just as she had left it, with her favorite bear sitting there, her drawings attached to the wall, and her shoes by the bed. A soft nightlight flickered in the corner, waiting for her to come back. Jim Bob stood motionless in the doorway, reluctant to go inside for what felt like an eternity. As he turned off the light, he whispered something under his breath, maybe a vow. The room seemed to become dark, and then the whole house. Days turned became weeks, and weeks into months as time went on. The Duggar house, which had formerly been a bustling hub of activity, echoed. The walls seemed to be breathing sorrowfully. Every room screamed out to her. The drawings of flowers and a stick figure that Jose had done were still on the refrigerator door, a reminder of his naivete. Her school sneakers, abandoned beneath the hall seat, seemed to long for the return of tiny feet that would never arrive. Michelle tried her best to keep the family together, preparing meals, creating traditions, and forcing smiles. But the melancholy has a rhythm of its own. Even in the brightest of brightness, it casts a shadow in every nook and crevice of a house.